Hi guys, and today we're going to be painting a Genestealer patriarch start to finish. And first of all, I want to say a huge thank you to the guys over at Goblin Gaming who sent me the Death Watch Overkill box set out for review. Please check the description box down below and you'll see a direct link to Goblin Gaming's web store. Okay guys, this is going to be a long video, so go grab yourself a nice hot drink and we'll get started. I'll first of all put the model together. It's a really simple and straightforward model to put together. Just tidied up some of the mould lines and then used plastic glue to put the miniature together. Here I'm using regular white PVA glue just to base the miniature. I use a mixture of different grains of ballast to base the miniature. I water down the PVA glue to make like a milky mixture, and that's to seal the grains of sand from the top, so when painting or dry brushing they don't become loose. After leaving the miniature 24 hours for the PVA glue to dry, it's time to prime the miniature. I'm priming the miniature really slowly and I'm making sure that the paint goes on really thinly. You could actually probably tell that some of the grey plastic might even show through. I want the primer to be that thin. Here I'm going to be painting the whole mini in Vallejo Model Air black. If you have a black primer you could have skipped this stage, but I don't have black primer, that's why I've painted the miniature in Vallejo Model Air black. Now I'm going to base coat the Genestealer using Vallejo Game Air Alien Purple. I really love this colour, it looks really nice and vibrant. I'm not worried if the alien purple gets on the carapace because I'm going to be painting over that by hand shortly. So don't worry about masking at this stage. It's just a case of trying to be a little bit neat, but if it goes on any parts of the black carapace that you don't want it, don't worry, it's going to be painted over shortly. Here I'm adding Vallejo Game Air Warlord Purple to parts of the alien purple. It adds a really nice contrast between the colour of the alien purple using the Warlord purple. Here I'm adding Vallejo Game Air Squid Pink very sparingly, just to the back part of the brain of the alien, just to give it that extra highlight. Here I'm airbrushing Vallejo Game Air Magic Blue, and I'm hitting all of the areas of the carapace, but I'm trying to as hard as I can to avoid the purple areas that I painted earlier. Here I'm using a Winsor & Newton Series 7 size 0 brush. I highly recommend getting a quality brush as they'll last you a lot longer than the cheap brushes you can get from Games Workshop. Also, they always keep a really fine tip, which is absolutely crucial to getting very fine and accurate details. You'll notice if you look at the bristles of the brush that the paint only travels up so far on the bristles of the brush. This helps to get great control over the painting. If you load the brush with too much paint, it's really hard to control where the paint goes. The paint that I'm using is Vallejo Game Air Magic Blue, and as it's already a pre-thinned paint ready to spray out the airbrush, I don't need to thin this paint at all, as it goes onto the model nice and smoothly straight out of the pot. Here you may notice that I use my thumb as a palette. What I sometimes do if I load the brush up with too much paint, I use the back of my thumb to twist the bristles of the brush into a nice sharp point and also remove a little bit of excess paint. This allows me to get really nice smooth sharp lines when I'm painting the miniature. It's not the most neatest thing to do and my thumb gets really messy, but this is just one way I like to paint. Here I sped up the footage just so you can see how I methodically work from panel to panel on the carapace of the Genestealer. I take my time and, as I say, never load my brush up with too much paint. There's certain areas of the carapace, like the spikes and some of the nooks and crannies, that I want to remain black, so I go back in with Leo Model Air Black and I touch up these areas with a brush. I'm using the edge of the brush just to catch all the sharp points of the spikes at the sides and at the front and at the rear of the spikes, just to give it a nice highlight with Vallejo Game Air Magic Blue. I'm painting the tongue with Warlord Purple. The teeth get a base coat with Games Workshop's Zandri Dust. All of the purple areas of the Mini are going to get a wash using Games Workshop's Drucci Violet. Here I'm using a 1-to-1 mix of Alien Purple and Vallejo Model Air White, so it's 1 drop of Model Air White to 1 drop of Alien Purple, and I'm ever so slightly just touching the edges of all of the miniature, so just the extreme edges are getting highlights. And if you notice, I've rolled the bristles of the brush into a nice fine tip as well. Using Vallejo Game Colour Blazing Orange to paint the eyes, and I'm not too worried if the blazing orange goes a little bit on the edges, as I can always touch that up with Alien Purple later on. Teeth get a final highlight of Ushabti Bone by Games Workshop. I've switched over to a slightly larger brush now to use the chainmail paint on the tube that the Genestealer is standing on. I'm using Vallejo Game Colour Gory Red. The base is being painted in Vallejo Game Air Earth. Gets a heavy wash of Games Workshop's Null Nile. Null Nile has dried. I'm starting to dry brush the pipe using Vallejo Game Air Silver. All of the painted areas on the pipe that have been painted with brassy brass are getting a wash of Agrax Earthshade by Games Workshop. The base is given a wash of Agrax Earthshade. The pipe valve is going to be given a highlight of Vallejo Game Air Bloody Red. The skulls are base coated in Games Workshop's Xandri Dust. I dry brush the base with Games Workshop's Xandri Dust. The skulls are highlighted with a shabti bone. Here I'm using Live Colours Eroding Light Rust, which is a liquid pigment, just to add a little bit of interest to the pipe, going round all of the edges of the ridges. Here I'm just touching up some of the areas that the pipes got onto the claws of the Genestealer, so I'm just using Vallejo Game Air Magic Blue to touch up those claws. Here I'm using Vallejo Game Air Electric Blue just to add some extreme highlights to the miniature. Here I'm giving the tongue a final highlight of Vallejo Game Air Squid Pink. I wasn't happy with the dry brush, so I wash over the dry brushing with some Agrax Earthshade, and that'll settle into all the nooks and crannies nicely. Here I'm spraying Vallejo Model Air Black and being very careful just to hit the edges of the model and not any of the painted detail that we've done on the actual miniature. I really hope you've enjoyed this video guys, and if you have, please hit the like button and also share it amongst friends. And I also want to say a huge thank you once again to my sponsors Goblin Gaming. Please check the description box down below and you'll see a direct link to Goblin Gaming's web store. And thanks for watching guys, and I'll catch you in the next video.